Hello and welcome to another live stream. I hope you can hear me and see me okay and all of those good things. Uh, hope I don't look too much like a raccoon. Um, I long story. You don't want to know. Um, anyway, we're here. Um, and yeah, um, I hope that you're all happy to be here and happy to talk about morality and mages. The reason for today's conversation is because I was reading a whole bunch of moral philosophy recently. For the other channel, the little booktube channel, I was doing a episode on John Gwain's Bloodsworn. And that book was essentially about why we change our minds. And so that got me onto moral philosophy. So I reread Kant and Hume and Adam Smith and some Rorty and and it got me thinking about magic and morality. So if someone in the chat can confirm that you can hear me and see me, that would be great. So just while we're waiting for people to come online and all that, I don't know if anybody else has read Rorty's stuff. He's a neo-pragmatist, I think is the label they use for him. I don't know that the label matters that much in his case. He's one of those philosophers that leaves you kind of staring at the ceiling and wondering, like, do I even exist? Is anything real? He's one of those. So it's great. But it is quite a different read from, like, say, Kant, who believes in universal truths and so on. Rorty absolutely rejects universal truths, which, makes him interesting in his own right. Whatever your opinion of him is. Okay. So one of the things that I think goes underdeveloped in in any given fantasy setting is what moral frameworks would develop alongside magic. Because here's the thing, see, morality, as we understand it now, developed alongside us. As our technology and evolutionarily and so on we developed, so did our moral frameworks. And there are, and basically that was the development was there in order to create trust within a society. Okay, so why do we have moral rules like don't steal or don't lie? It is to create trust between people who don't necessarily know each other. Moral frameworks are actually something of a superpower because they allow us to work together without the trust of knowing someone personally. And that is actually a pretty incredible thing to be able to do, right? Because if you think about other social animals, right, discounting the eusocial animals and the insects, if you think about even the other great apes, they work together in small groups because those are the individuals that they know and therefore trust personally. When you know and trust someone personally, you don't need a moral framework because you know them, you trust them. The moral framework comes to be in order to create the larger tribe. And that larger tribe is really what enabled us to create the civilizations that we have today. It's what allowed us to dominate the planet and all of those attributes, right? So, and the moral framework is created on the basis of trust. It's there to create trust. Okay. So, with magic, what changes is that your risk is altered. Okay. And now it depends a little bit on what your magic is. So, let's say you have low magic, right? And people can, I don't know, they can do small things. Um, they can cast illusions, maybe, or maybe they can clean water, or they can do like, or maybe they can, do little bits of foresight or something like that, like low magic. All right. Then you have some low magic risk attached to that. Right. But if people can do high magic things, they can throw fireballs around, they can, cast the whole D&D spell set. Now you have a lot of risk attached to meeting a mage, okay? Meeting a strange mage that you don't know. And so you would need to develop, in order for civilization to exist as we understand it today, right? In order for your sapient species to be able to develop, they would need to create a moral framework that rests on on that ameliorates the risk of meeting someone who can incinerate you with a fireball. Okay, because that's basically what that moral framework does. It creates the expectation that the mage isn't going to burn your face off for no reason, right? That is what it's there for. Okay. So that is essentially the kind of like large essence. All right. Now, the reason why I was reading all the philosophers again is because the kind of three big ways that is useful, in my opinion, to think about morality is in Kant's categorical imperative, in Hume, and in our boy Adam Smith. And yes, I am talking about Adam Smith of the Invisible Hand famousness, but he was actually a moral philosopher, not an economist. And before he wrote Wealth of Nations, he wrote a book called I forget. I sorry. Look up Adam Smith's moral book if you're curious about it. But basically, in there, and I'll tell you what it said in a moment. Let me just cover Kant and Hume first, because they're like the two big ones on either side. So Kant, Immanuel Kant, that is, who was a German philosopher, very, very pedantic, very rigid. People in his town set their clocks by the daily walks that he took. So Kant says that we are categorically, we have a categorical imperative with morality, and we should only act in such a manner that we are willing to see everybody else in the world act, right? So he applies this kind of universal law to morality. Now, what that means, and the flaw in that theory, is that, let's say you lie to save someone's life. In Kant's view, this is fundamentally immoral, because it would allow everybody in the world to lie, and thus the society would collapse into chaos, right? So Kant would never, under his kind of systems, permit a lie even to save someone's life. And thus it becomes a very harsh kind of system, right? So that's the rational side of the argument. On the Hume side of the argument, David Hume very famously said, rationality is the slave to passion, and it should only ever be that. I might be slightly misquoting him. I don't have the quote in front of me, but that was sort of what he said. He was a Scotsman, and he lived at the same time as Immanuel Kant, roughly speaking, if I remember correctly. And Hume said, we are driven by emotions, and it is our empathy that decide our morality, which I think matches more closely with the truth. The problem is, if you base your whole morality on Hume's argument, you end up in a situation where your morality changes as your empathy engages and disengages, and your empathy can switch very rapidly. Wirbis, I will get back to that argument, but I actually disagree with you. It is not just about violence. Magic is more impactful than just violence because you can do more with it. But I will get back to that. Okay. So those are our two big philosophical schools: the emotional school and the rational school. Then we have Adam Smith, whose model I really like, right? So his is just like, how does morality form, evolutionary speaking? And this kind of helped me think about how I would world build this. So Adam Smith clearly liked invisible things because he did Invisible Hand of the Market, but he also did The Impartial Spectator, which is also like an invisible thing. And the impartial spectator is what we imagine. We imagine somebody observing our actions, right? And then we judge our own actions to be moral or not based on this impartial spectator. But the impartial spectator's opinions are informed by our society. So I'll give you an example. Here in Finland, we all stand on one side of the escalator and leave a gap in case anybody wants to walk past us on the escalator, right? And when people come to Finland, when people who are not Finnish come to Finland, they often don't know this. And so they stand in the wrong place. They stand, the elevator full. And then they'll get disapproving looks. And sometimes someone will say to them that they're doing the wrong thing. And people will, after like a day or two of being in Finland, they will move because their impartial spectator has updated to match our society's here expectation to stand on the side of the escalator. Okay, so that is that is what the impartial spectator does and how it's updated. Okay. The reason why I disagree with Wirbis, who said in here that we can replace the word magic with violence, right? The reason why I disagree with this is because magic can also read the future, read people's thoughts, affect people's cooking, create food, clean water, create clothing. You can do a lot with magic. It is therefore not the same as just the control of violence, right? Controlling violence is just one aspect of our moral frameworks. That's caught up in things like, don't murder, don't hit somebody in the face, don't, like, all of these kinds of like moral rules around violence. But there are also other moral rules, like don't lie, don't steal, don't stand the elevator full unless you plan to walk, don't listen to your videos without earbuds in a public place. Those are all folkways that form part of our moral framework. So violence, yes, is part of what we would aim to control with magic, but it is not the only thing. So if anybody missed it, don't stress. You can always listen to the last 15 minutes. I basically have just spent the last 15 minutes talking about moral philosophy in general, people like Kant and Hume and Adam Smith and so on. Yes, absolutely. Magic can also be part of people's structure and spirituality and so on. It can be part of the religion. It can be an invocation of the gods. So magic can be a whole lot of things in the world, and all of them alter the risk of meeting a stranger, right? And so the moral framework that you develop for your cultures is essentially there to ameliorate the risk of meeting a strange mage, because that is what moral frameworks do. They ameliorate that risk. Um, okay, so step one in defining a moral framework for your magic is indeed to identify the trust deficit. And that means defining what your magic system is, which is exactly what Werbis just said in the chat. We need to define what kind of magic we're talking about. Remember, each moral framework will be unique to your world, right? If you're building a D&D world, it will deal with D&D magic. In my world of Sangwell Chronicles, it will deal with my blood magic and my, my ability to use Elamar and all of those details. If you're writing an urban fantasy, it might deal with like secrecy and vampirism and that kind of thing, right? So it's basically, what is your magic and what risk does that create when a non-magic user meets a mage, when two mages meet and they don't know each other, and when enemy mages meet, right? So what is the risk that is present between these people? And then we go, okay, what is our primary philosophical driver here? Are we going to follow the Humean empathy, the Kant's rationality, a combination between the two of them? And importantly, how will that affect the impartial spectator? How will the spectator that is judging the mage or the non-mage or whatever react to changes in the environment? How will updates happen? And then you want to take that kind of like empathy and rationality, and you want to combine it into, how does that become an actionable rule or a ritual, right? Or a folk way. And how does that help people identify non-majors, majors, and so on? Well, I mean, what are you building? Are you building a world where there is no tribalism? Where there is no distinction between them and us? So even in a world with tribalism, bear in mind that trade morality, for example, came to exist in order to facilitate trade between tribes, right? So it does not have to be a comprehensive cultural framework that defines the entire tribe. It can just define rules of engagement in general between peoples. So, and honestly, like, well, well, yes. I mean, I draw on our world to build fantasy worlds. So I think about how our world acts and then adjust and change it. So The Jedi organized their way of life around the Force being existential foundation. Yes, exactly. So that is their core principle, right? But what does that mean for their moral framework, right? So here's an example. Let's say you have low magic in your world. You have rare magic or it's unpredictable, right? So it's kind of Tolkien-esque style magic, maybe. Um, then uh, trust then relies on human fear and taboos because mages don't need systemic regulation because magic doesn't always work, right? Um, if you have more medium magic, so magic is professionalized, then you might have more explicit institutions and duties that govern what mages are expected to do, right? But if you have high magic, super ubiquitous, well integrated magic, then you would probably have very pragmatic moral systems and laws that govern that magic. So, and I mean, as I said earlier, don't just get stuck on violence. Think about things like charm. When can a mage use a spell like charm? How about telepathy? How about the the alteration of someone's memories? Is there ethics around these abilities? Right? So, how would you handle such a such an ability? So, um, I'm just going to briefly share world building blueprints. So, in world building blueprints, ate a friend spell. Yes. So, in world building blueprints, I have this section as part of the culture where I talk about the core ideology of the culture, which would be something like our Jedi conversation, right? Um, where where do you fall on the pillars of culture? So hierarchy, collectivism, freedom, and traditional versus progressive. And bear in mind that these are all just sliding scales and there's no right or wrong answers, right? So these are just kind of like your defining core of your culture. And this will help you understand also then how people feel about magic in the context of these attributes. But then we go on from here to the second culture, which is to the second circle, which is norms. And this is where I would define the framework. Now, I didn't, when I wrote World Building Blueprints, include all of my thoughts on moral philosophy, honestly. I hadn't read Kant and so on in a while. So, here we are. But we do have a fairly comprehensive framework here, nonetheless, that we can adapt given our conversation that we've spoken about today. So folkways are small morals, right? They make things a little easier to work with. And so we take you here, you define your folkways as part of your moral framework, given your magic system, right? What makes the friction in your society less? What moral rules make it less? And those are folkways. Then, what are norms? Norms are, mores. What are mores? Mores are more strict. Mores are things which you should and should not do, right? Mostly which you should do. You should ask permission before you read somebody's mind. You should ask permission before you alter somebody's history. These are questions that you should ask of people, that you should get consent for. You should protect the people of your tribe. Perhaps you should kill your enemies, like whatever those mores are. And then you would probably have taboos, right? And taboos would then be things like you should never charm somebody of the tribe, or you should never charm somebody unless you have been instructed to do so by an elder, or whatever the case is, right? Forbidden things. And all of these attributes, mores, folkways, taboos, all of them contribute to increasing the trust of the society, right? Now, as Wirbis pointed out, this is all essentially tribalism, right? I mean, a moral framework applies to us, not to them, right? Except when we have shared moral frameworks that reside at a little higher level, and that are normally more sparse than the lower level frameworks. But, and this is where Rorty comes in, the neo-pragmatist, stories and narrative understanding can make the us circle bigger, right? So we can say, okay, as humans, we all owe this to each other. And that is our kind of baseline moral framework, So that kind of like, who does the moral framework apply to? Who doesn't it apply to? And what is its largest circle and its smallest circle? And bear in mind that the bigger circle will normally have kind of less moral laws associated with it, and it will kind of be looser. The people will play more loosey-goosey with those moral laws than with the ones that are, the tight ones. And that's just the nature of people, so all right, let me see what questions there are. I agree. The free will and like telepathy and charm and all those spells, man, I don't like wrestling with them from a moral standpoint. Like, that's why I don't generally include them in worlds that I build, because I'm like, this is the potential for such abuse. Your love potions, all of those things. I'm like, oof. It was like when what's her face? Wonder Woman, in Wonder Woman 1984, when she made that wish and her boyfriend took over the body of that guy and they did the devil's tango, and I was like, this is very non-consensual. This is not cool, and I feel the same way about kind of charm and so on. I'm like, I don't like those. I don't like it. Would not mages have their own moral code that they police themselves? So, Ivo, maybe. But the thing about a moral code is it exists to reduce the risk of meeting someone that you don't know personally. And a non-mage might meet a mage, right? So there needs to be a moral framework between the mage and the non-mage, as well as between mages, right? So that if I meet a mage tomorrow in the street, I have some faith that he won't just cast charm on me and take me off to join his harem or whatever. I have no idea why a mage would want me in his harem. I'm, you know, whatever. Like, but let's imagine for a moment that I look like Pamela Anderson or something. Um, and I need to have that kind of faith, and I can only have that kind of faith if there's a moral framework that governs not just mage to mage interactions, but also mage to me interactions. And bear in mind that, like most moral frameworks, it won't be explicitly policed. There might be laws and they might be policed, but the moral framework is policed by our social expectations. Um, and like all moral frameworks. um, Pilfer of love is another one. I am not fond of those things. Like they make me feel very sketchy. Um, Yeah, exactly. Like maybe the character has little control over it, but it's still a moral failing. And how the society reacts to that moral failing is interesting in and of itself. Like as Jasmine says, she has one character who can read people's minds. Um, you know, magic might be explained. Yeah. Um, yeah, love potions are dodgy. um, um, Applying Rorty's neo-pragmatism to Star Wars, we can say that all sapient life forms are embodiments of the Force, which can allow the Force to learn about itself and enact harmony. Yes, that, sort of. But we also have to acknowledge that the Force is a circular argument. And therefore, at its heart, if we live in a truly irony-filled manner, we must acknowledge that it's still self-referencing. Like Rorty, every time I read Rorty, I'm left kind of staring blindly at the wall, going, "Do I? Do I exist?" Like I love him, I really do. Don't get me wrong, but he is a mind bending read. Um, so hello, Bravo. Uh, Babylon 5 is great with the mind readers and Psycore. They actually have some really good exploration of how such a moral framework might develop. Like the the Psycore have got signals, right? So they wear gloves to prevent accidental mind reading, and they only mind read if they're invited or on a contract and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of like ethical rules around using their psi. Um, their internal policing within the psi core is what one might call draconian. Bester remains one of the most epic villains I have ever encountered, and I highly recommend everybody watch Babylon 5. It's amazing, but yeah, it's a very good exploration of a moral framework with mages. Um, so maybe the thing is, Ivo, if let's take this all the way back, right, to when we're developing as a civilization. Let's say mages are so overpowered that they can literally just suppress everyone around them. At that point, we wouldn't develop culture as we understand it today, right? Because we'd either be running from mages or figuring out ways to kill mages. and then mages would either completely take over the world or not, right? If you take this all the way back to caveman type of things, where our moral framework started developing, you know, the archaeologists and anthropologists speculate that we started developing rituals and rites and things like that, like before Homo sapiens pitched up. Okay, so this stuff goes way back. So depending on where your magic pitches up, if you say that mages have zero interest in governing their trust with non-mages, that means that your cultures didn't develop, like, at all, in the same way, because the trust that was engendered between members of a tribe would never have developed if mages have no interest in governing their relationship with non-mages. So you completely change your world's development at that point, which is 100% fine. You can do that, but just bear that in mind, right? If mages have no interest in following a moral framework, your whole development process changes. Um, you know, I see this comment so often, how a cleric acts should be explained by their deity's will. So here's my argument with that. I hear you, but I also know people, right? and and I have met people where you will say, like, I want you to do this, and they'll be like, what does this mean? What do you mean by do? What do you mean by me? And the kind of like sneaky details that they will engage in to slip and slide around the rules is legendary. People are quite capable of disobeying a deity's will, right? Without without disobeying it. And I also think that unless your deity is going to like sit right on top of people with like a power fist pounding down onto them, forcing them to obey its will, I think they're going to work out their own frameworks. like, like think of what happened with the Emperor in Warhammer 40K. Right? Even when he was still alive, and forcing people to follow his governance, what happened? He had a heresy. Right under his nose, heresy developed. So yeah. So yeah, people, people, people will find a way. Yeah, the moment that it looked like the Jedi were acting in a way that people didn't understand it to be in concert with the rules, the population turned on them, right? I mean, oh, sure, the deity could have a baseline, but yeah, people shenanigan. What if magic has become so normalized it's just a mundane part? That is an interesting question. So first, if magic is just normalized, it's just a mundane part of life, then it would be governed by whatever moral frameworks govern the normal part of life, right? So if you have moral framework that says, don't steal, that would include your magic. Don't steal with your magic, for example. But let's say the root of your magic is dependent on you, I don't know, sacrificing mice or something in order to get power. I'm just using mice as an example. Yeah, it could be anything, any act that could be seen as evil. The thing about saying that there's a religious group that rightly believes magic is something evil is rightly, obviously, as defined by you, the author, right? So you're defining magic as being evil. Now, this group then says, okay, you people are all being evil, right? 100%. But unless their moral framework is the dominant one, they're not going to convince anybody else, right? So then it becomes a question of how does their moral framework intersect with the dominant group's moral framework, and what does that relationship look like? Is it like the Amish who just refuse to engage with technology, right? That's an option. Your religious group could refuse to engage. Or do they actively oppose mages and they actually try and murder mages because they see this as a righteous act? So that's kind of the question that you wrestle with. Uh, so Jasmine, I don't think that's the only way to ensure that mages behave. I know I make that argument myself sometimes, but I have been thinking about it. I could probably kill somebody. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, obviously. At least I say I wouldn't. I wouldn't, under current circumstances, just go into my neighbor's house and hold a pillow over her mouth and you know snuff her out, right? But in theory, I mean, she's like 80, and she walks with a walker. I probably could, right? Why don't I? I mean, she has stuff in her house, right? I could do that, and I could take her TV. I don't know. She gets visitors like maybe once a month, so nobody would even know, right? And I could score a TV out of it. Why don't I? I don't, because I want to be part of the society that I live in. And the society that I live in frowns on that kind of act. And so my impartial spectator, as Adam Smith would put it, has been trained to look at that action and go like, no, that is a wrong action. Don't do that. Right? Now, why would a mage necessarily engage in such an immoral act just because they have more power than I do? Because we're both capable of this thing, right? And that's the difference between morality and law. When it comes to law, I completely agree with you. You have to have some means of punishing the mage that involves sealing away their power, or somehow punishing them despite their power. So 100% on a law level, yes. But morality is not law. Law is there to deal with the outliers of your society. Morality is there to ameliorate distrust. It is not actually enforceable. Morality is almost never enforceable, right? Morality is only enforceable through society's approval or disapproval. So, yeah, hope that makes sense. Mice farms go burr, exactly. Do they? Do mages have far greater concerns? It depends on your mages, I guess. I have met some very, very petty mages in my time of reading fantasy. Very petty. Thoughts on using astral projection to communicate between cities and islands? I think astral projection would work fine as a means of communication. You would probably, for official communication, you might need some way to verify it, some kind of astral seal or something like that. You know, people do tend to want, like, did this thing that you say the other person said, did it really happen? That could be a great plot. If somebody was like, I have heard news from the capital that blah, blah, blah happened. Meantime, you know, the capital's like 10,000 miles away and the king has said no such thing. And then the mage just kind of like sneaks the information around. Astral projection would also be a really nasty way to do market manipulation if you have a modern stock market type device. um, so objective and subject. So the thing about morality is it almost has to be somewhat subjective, right? Like at the very largest level, because if there were no humans, there would be no human morality. You know what I mean? Like at that level. Um, but of course, that's such a huge level that it's not really relevant. So yeah, it depends on kind of what you mean by evil acts and so on. um, yes, Doctor Doom is a petty mage. He's a very petty mage. um, So morality is contingent on who is teaching the mage. It's also contingent on the mage's interaction with society, right? Because while you do, I mean, you do obviously learn a lot of your morality from your parents and from your school and so on, but you also learn it in interacting with your peers and in interacting with the rest of society and so on. So there's a whole lot of inputs that come into your understanding of morality and so on. So I'm at the moment, by the way, reading R.J. Barker's The Bone Ship, which is spectacular. And the moral framework there would give you literal nightmares. Like I'm like, wow, wow. I have seen authors do evil societies, right? This society is enough to give you nightmares. They would give Warhammer 40K nightmares, the society. And and uh they're rough. And and yet the way that he put it together, the way that the bone ship cultures are put together, you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You know, I understand how this moral framework developed. It's scary, and I don't want it, but I understand it. I understand where it comes from. Um, so it's a very interesting series to read from a moral philosophy perspective. You know, this goes way beyond, like, say, John Gwaine has a society that has an acceptance of slavery, right? And we're talking like full blown chattel slavery. You know, because the tainted are that their blood is tainted by the old gods, you know, the gods who were destroyed in the apocalypse, and they are all automatically thralled, and they are all supposed to be automatically thralled with like magical collars. And you know, that's a to a modern eye, to my eye, certainly, I was like, woof, woof. You know, and one of the characters you meet in John Gwaine's book is like one of the people who put these thrall collars on, you know, on these tainted, like, his, um, but and again, he makes it work, right? You understand where this moral framework comes from. You understand why these people just accept it and all the rest of that. but Barker went balls to the wall, right? These people sacrificed their firstborn, and they are something else. So, um, yeah, it's interesting. Um, Hello, Sir Peasbury or Jay and Frey. I think mages are people and can be, yes, absolutely. Mages can be moral or immoral, of course. This is more about, so today was more about like how do you develop a moral framework, right? And to me, the big thing that you have to identify in order to develop a moral framework is you have to establish what causes distrust, right? Between a mage and a non-mage, and between a mage and a mage. Because moral frameworks develop in order to engender trust, to engender the trust. Like I have trust that I'm not going to get beaten up by walking down the street, right? Because we frown on violence in my culture. So if there were mages, I would want to have trust that I'm not going to get fireballed in the face because I'm walking down the street, right? So that would then be a point of distrust, a point that depletes trust is then a mage can fireball me in the face. Okay, why would a mage fireball me in the face? How do I prevent that happening? And what is then the moral action to take to make sure that that doesn't happen to me? So that's just kind of the development of moral frameworks. Um, so uh, so Anakin is an interesting question. Anakin was manipulated by Palpatine, absolutely. I was very disappointed in that movie. Like the manipulation was very, very childish. I know that Rings of Power is not a very good show, but the second season, the manipulation that Sauron brought to bear on the smith who actually makes the rings. God help me. I can't remember his name right this second. But the Charlie Vickers and Charles, the two Charlies played him in the TV series. And the manipulation Sauron brought to bear there was magnificent. It was so good. Like that was fantastic manipulation. With Anakin, yes, he was manipulated, but he was also an idiot. Like, um, why would a match would make a great book name, especially for a satirical book. um, yeah, X-Men is a good exploration of that kind of morality as well and how they develop. Yeah, Rings of Power, man. It had so much potential, and yeah, they screwed it up so badly. It annoys me so much because it was like they just tried to cram so much into it. We like and they didn't give any of the storylines enough room to breathe. And also nobody needed grimdark hobbits. Like literally nobody. There was not a soul asking for grimdark hobbits. But regardless, if you can make it through to the second season, the episodes where Sauron is talking to the Elven Smith, fantastic, magnificent, how he manipulates it. Depends on whether your mages are clever. Again, Skeletor. I have known petty mages in some fantasy books. I've also known very clever mages, so they come in all kinds of flavors and sizes. And that is more or less my thoughts on moral frameworks. Um, do you guys have more questions, more thoughts? Um, so Calibrimbor, thank you, Tiffany. Calibrimbor, yes, exactly. Exactly. um, yeah, so the scenes between Calibrimbor and and Sauron were really great in the second season. Really, really fantastic. So, yeah. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Yeah, the fact that they made the fact that they made Galadriel a warrior didn't bother me at all. She was a general in JRRT's world. There was none of that bothered me. I also understood what they were doing with her character arc, right? What they were trying to do with her character arc was start her out at a position of arrogance, and her growth arc was supposed to be that she learns humility, right? That part I was on board with. The problem was they rushed that storyline, right? Um, they didn't give it space to really breathe and develop. And the same problem exists with Half Elf. Uh, man, these people's names are escaping me right now. Anyway, um, he had long hair in the movies and short hair in the TV show. Um, he his storyline wasn't given room to breathe, and it was one of the best in there. And the mystery box of who is Gandalf, I could really have done without that. I would have preferred an actual blue wizard. That would have been great. And the grimdark hobbits, no one needed the grimdark hobbits. You know, seriously. We don't leave anyone behind, except if your wagon breaks, we will just leave you to die. Like, no one needed that. I'm stuck with that opinion. um, Lord Elrond, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Latino Mafunu, you have a question. Who do I think should have been put in charge of ROP? I don't know. Me. Actually, no, I lie. There's an amazing Lord Rings channel, Tolkien channel here on YouTube. I think that guy should have been put in charge. He actually knows the lore. um, what do you make of Marvel's mutants being marginalized for their powers, but not mutates like Captain America or the Fantastic Four? So there's a couple of things. One is like comic books are weird because they have multiple authors and different authors, and the world consistency is thus lower. It is in some ways harder to bring coherence to the moral frameworks that they explore. So, just on that principle, it is harder. If this was, however, the way that a world was presented to me from a single author, right? A single author had created this world. My opinion would be that the moral framework is people who are close to human, like the mutants, are judged to be bad, right? On an almost like um, a disabling kind of point, like it's genetic. They're not part of us, right? But people who are superheroes, like the Fantastic Four and so on, who have basically had an accident, right? It's not genetic. So they are still judged to be part of us, but an accident has happened to them. And that was probably how I'd split the morality if I was building such a world. So the mutants are genetic and therefore not part of us, and therefore different morality applies. The superheroes are accidents and therefore still part of us. I don't know. That might be an explanation. I hope that I hope that makes sense. Um, yeah, exactly. Mutants are us evolving. Yeah, so it's us versus them because it's genetic versus the superheroes, which are yeah. Um, a world of ubiquitous magic, is the morality and power dynamics based on those who know how to use magic? I'm not sure what you're asking, absolutely citroon. Um, no, I don't think that morality would necessarily be based on those who know how to use magic offensively. I think it depends on your magic's weaknesses. Like, sure, maybe you can fireball somebody, but afterwards you fall unconscious. So you can't afford to fireball somebody without having friends around. So you still need to maintain some friendships, right? And that would still require the evolutionary development of um, some moral frameworks around not fireballing those who protect you, kind of thing. So it depends again a little bit on your magic and so on. But like our moral frameworks, our earliest moral frameworks are not necessarily based around who can punch the fastest. They're based around how to create trust, right? So work from that position. Like, what is the deficit of trust between two people meeting if they're part of the same tribe or part of the same us? And how do you ameliorate that through morality? I mean, if somebody's good at cooking with magic, they might still be very useful, and you still don't want to drive them away by being mean to them. So, uh, okay, cool. All right. I think that is good. It's been an hour of yapping. It's been a fun hour. And I will, next weekend will be another world building blueprints. And then we will have a live show after that. Thanks everyone for staying to chat. And yeah, if you shut up late, you can watch the stream from the beginning. It will be set on replay and all the rest of that. And yeah, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another live stream. Have an amazing weekend. And thank you always for your support. I very much appreciate the views and the eyes and the attention and everything else. It is, much appreciated. Have a great weekend. Cheers, everyone.